Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 70.
70.
70.
70 episodes.
70. It's quite good, really.
That's great, yeah.
Not to pat ourselves on the back too much, but it's pretty good. Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. This week...
Video, yeah. Which is, I mean, not just this. I should say, for our people that are just listening to the audio version of this, we're filming ourselves.
Yeah.
Which is...
Podcasting.
Yeah. We're also doing Presence, the film Presence. But, it's kind of a new addition to our armoury.
Yes.
And it's exciting.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, a considerable degree of trepidation that is growing into fear.
Yes.
The moment you hit record, it was pretty high. Yeah, it's something we've been discussing for a while.
Presence.
Yes. Steven Soderberg's paranormal home invasion ghost film.
Yeah.
Just a ghost film.
Pretty much.
Yeah, haunting film.
Yeah.
A film that I didn't really hear a lot about. I think I alluded to this on the last episode that I'd heard nothing until I saw posters about it, which is a bit embarrassing for me considering that obviously this is supposed to be something I keep abreast of, but I literally knew nothing about this film.
No,
and I went into it knowing it was a ghost film, but coming out feeling pretty good about it, and I'm looking forward to discussing that.
Yes, yeah.
Also, we'll be discussing the career of Soderbergh a little bit.
Okay,
and why he sort of stands out from a lot of filmmakers in his kind of area.
Yeah.
And also the kind of the ghost film. I've been watching a few in the build up to this episode, so we're going to rattle through a few of those and talk about some of the sort of key themes and kind of stylistic choices that are definitely present in this film, even though Soderbergh plays with them quite a bit in his kind of classic way. There's lots to unpack, I think.
Nice. Looking forward to it.
Shall we do it?
Let's do it.
Questing the cinematic void. So, Steve Soderbergh.
Yeah.
I guess like a fair kind of opening description of him as a filmmaker would be that he's someone that, amongst his contemporaries, he is different in the way that he not only approaches his film stylistically, but also the technology he uses.
Oh, yeah.
His readiness to kind of use the kind of technology that, that is available to
the consumer, basically.
People like us.
Yeah.
Someone that not only stylistically is very innovative and his use of technology, but also in the way he challenges the sort of studio system and the conventional way in which it distributes films.
Yeah.
So, he's kind of like a bit of a, I don't know, maverick may be a bit strong, but he's certainly someone that, he definitely has his own sort of vibe about him, doesn't he? I think.
Yeah. He's playing by his own rules.
Yeah.
And I think he enjoys that. And I think he sort of enjoys disruption of, not necessarily in the plots of his films.
No.
But like the way he handles filmmaking in general. And I think he would include film, when he would say filmmaking not just being on set and like directing people. He's probably talking about seeing it through right to the theatre or small screen.
Yeah.
That's probably his approach, and I think he's probably a bit of a control freak, as most directors are, because I think he's quite disillusioned with the traditional sort of distribution pipeline, which is, I mean, so a lot of his films, like the releases of them are really bizarre, quite fascinating.
He has his own distribution company, doesn't he?
That does not surprise me at all.
Yeah. I don't know how many of his films he's released through it. Probably done with researching that. Here we go, Yeah. But, that says something about that kind of, like, desire to, as you say, see a film through from, the sort of original creation of an idea right through to, distribution.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's really interesting, and I think in some ways that disillusionment is kind of merited, particularly these days. Not to be too cynical, but I think it's I guess a pretty sorry state of affairs unless you're sort of a filmmaker that can make things on a smaller budget and not have this kind of intervention. You can kind of work in the sort of confines of a smaller budget, which might mean less sort of studio intervention.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's made some films though that have been pretty big movies, pretty expensive films.
Yeah, Ocean's 11.
Yeah, I mean that's
Contagion. That was a huge one, and that sort of stood the test of time. Yeah. And I think even like The Good German, like he's done some really ambitious projects, but then he goes and films like Unsane on an iPhone.
Yeah.
Or like films an entire movie on a boat in a wheelchair and gets someone to cart him around. Like I can't remember the name of that particular film, but I know he did that. Almost the mythology around the making of the film can sometimes be more important and interesting than the film itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's something you've said there as well, just in the few films that you've mentioned. Like, he's one of those filmmakers that, we talk about, for example, James Mangold, who works across different genres in that kind of director for hire sort of capacity. Although we've kind of rallied against that term in the case of Mangold to an extent.
Yeah.
But, he's... What interests me, about Soderberg is that his filmography is quite diverse. It's really difficult to pin down.
Yeah.
And if you just look through films, like the same guy that made Presence has made, like, Magic Mike.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? To me, that's quite strange.
Oh, yeah. I don't think he's that concerned with finding a sort of style of filmmaking and sticking to it. I think he's really up for experimenting with genres, experimenting with different types of camera, and experimenting with obviously like we said, the release strategy. But he just happens to have a actual career whilst he's doing it. It's almost like his films are like research and development.
Yeah,
but they have the kind of, they're sort of good enough to be released. Whereas a lot of he's sort of constantly learning, I suppose, in a way, which is really interesting. Yeah,
it also makes me think of other filmmakers like Richard Linklater, in the sense that he has that very well documented kind of one for me, one for the studio kind of approach.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
and it kind of feels like, even though Soderbergh has made like some pretty, as you said, some pretty sort of big studio heavy hitter kind of films that I don't know, it feels different than that to me with him.
Yeah, I think so.
He plays with the sort of psychology of his characters in a way that perhaps like feels slightly different from the kind of expectations you'd have going into a more sort of mainstream film. Like, so you go into something like Magic Mike, for example, and your sort of preconceived ideas of that film are going to be pretty well entrenched.
Yes.
Given what the film's about, and given that there's this kind of the spectacle of the kind of sweat-drenched, oily male body. Yeah. But what you really get, you do get that, but in sort of classic Soderbergh style, there's a kind of quite, he sort of penetrates the psyche of these characters and kind of reveals the ultimate sadness of it, in a way that I didn't kind of expect. Yeah, foolishly, really. It's
not like a sort of sad indictment about the real lives of sort of male strippers. It actually, if anything, glorifies that profession quite well. Yeah. But it does kind of explore the idea of like why, what kind of man would go into a profession like that, and what's the background, what are their values, and that was unexpected, and like that is very Soderbergh,
and the societal expectations around those values as well. Yeah. I mean, we talked about Sean Baker, and we talked in his representation of sex work, and it's not necessarily the industry itself that is the problem. It's the way that industry is in relationship to the society that we live in, and the kind of expectations around that. Yeah, and I think you kind of get a sense of that in Magic Mike as well. That these people are kind of been pigeonholed before they've even started talking, and it's kind of like there's something kind of like meta about that, in the sense that as an audience member you go in expecting that, because the trailer does a very good job of kind of obscuring any of the kind of, it's very surface level. There's nothing underneath, and
it's like Cabaret almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I don't know. Like, I just sort of think that there's something in that. Which is classic Soderbergh.
I think if we go back to Contagion, I love that film. That is like intensely rewatchable for me. I don't know why. And yeah, surface level. Let's look at that. The plot of that. It's like a kind of global pandemic. This was 2010, mind you, like 9 years before an actual one happened. And it's got Kate Winslet, like Lawrence Fishburne. It's got Jude Law's in it.
Oh yeah,
it's got like a really stacked cast,
as a lot of his films tend to.
Yeah, Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah,
and you kind of like, if you kind of look at that at surface level, you'd probably think it was going to be like Outbreak or something, the film Outbreak with a monkey or something like that. But it sort of reels you in with that kind of premise, and then it is actually quite, scientifically speaking, like quite realistic. And it's clear that Soderbergh has taken great care into speaking to people from like the WHO and like, you know, what would happen, and realistically it's just going to be a bad cold for most people, but for some other people it means like the end of your life. And there's all these things sprinkled in it which are like fascinating, but in really grounded and like really sort of down to earth, and it explores what would happen to a society and how people would change and how the way people would interact with each other and all that kind of thing. And he kind of plays that under the, you know, it's a sort of subtle little shift into something like really, really fascinating. Even Ocean's 11 does that a little bit, because I mean that is a genre film, like, first and foremost.
Of course,
it's just like a crime caper where the criminals are the good guys kind of thing. But like, there's also the dynamic between all those characters is so like alive, and like it plays into the genre tropes really well. But then by the end there's that bit where they're all at the fountain and they all leave, and it's quite sad. It's quite like, oh well, it's finished now, like, and they're all going to go their separate ways, and it's sort of like it sort of makes you realise like, oh, they're like, these people mean something to me. Like, he's really good at that kind of stuff. I just think, going back to what you were saying about Magic Mike, he is the kind of filmmaker to reel you in with an idea, and then actually the film is about something else. Yeah.
One thing that always strikes me when I think about him, and this is going to sound quite dismissive, and I really don't mean it to, is that when you look at his movies, like, don't get me wrong, he's done some belters.
Yeah.
But there's so much there, and not a lot that you really remember. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know if that's because, as a filmmaker, he doesn't really have like a stylistic through line, or kind of like an attraction to a certain theme or narrative style. Yeah. That it feels difficult to feel like you're watching a Soderbergh movie.
Yep, definitely. I've had it before where his name's popped up in the credits, and I'm like, oh,
it's you.
Like Solaris, the 2002 Solaris.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that was him.
That's a big ask, that, isn't it?
Yeah, that is huge. I think
I don't remember disliking it hugely.
I actually thought the emotional sort of subtext of it was better, but the overall experience was a bit... It was a swing and a miss, I think, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, it didn't work. But a lot of his films don't, and that's what, you know, goes back to what we were saying before about him experimenting and trying and failing. Like, for every Traffic, there's going to be good German, isn't there?
Yeah.
Traffic's good. I like Traffic. That was like colour coded. Do you remember that? It's Benicio del Toro.
Oh, yeah.
Cheadle, yeah. And it's like the drug trade from three different perspectives.
Yes.
From a user, from a dealer, and from like a boss, I think, or no, from like a DEA agent or something.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, loved that. Would never get away with it these days. I think the colour coding thing was a bit of a gimmick that was one and done. You know?
Yeah.
Good at the time though.
I mean, Che Guevara.
Oh, Jesus,
both of those, they're pretty great.
That was like one of the first films, mainstream movies, shot on a red digital camera, which was
right.
like, so like red, I think, for me, signified the sort of beginning of digital looking like film. So before then you had like Collateral, which was shot on like a Sony Viper cam, and it looks digital, like you watch it,
but in a way that suits the movie in a way.
Completely. Same with 28 Days Later, like it looks urban and like and sort of
something sterile about it.
Yeah. But the red camera was the first one to kind of like be no, this looks like film now. You can grade it and make it look like film.
There's a prestige to it. Almost.
Completely, yeah. And so he was a big early user of that technology. That was the year before Fincher used it for The Social Network. So he is a pioneer, very much so, in that respect.
He adopts things without cynicism, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think there's obviously a pretty like steadfast romanticism towards film.
Yep.
You know, how
the graininess.
Yeah. And, you know, I buy that argument for sure. It's just not a realistic one in the face of like new and upcoming filmmakers. Or filmmakers that are like working in a very sort of in the low budget sphere. It's not always a realistic expectation. Not that I think they would people like Scorsese would place that on their shoulders necessarily, but you know, the aforementioned Marty, Paul Thomas Anderson, Chris Nolan, these are all people that kind of like swear by film. Sean Baker,
Oh, does he?
And you know that. Well, I think some of it he's not.
Did he an iPhone film?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is a bit strange,
Tangerine,
but he does talk about the importance of the kind of use of physical
really?
film. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think he's as steadfast as the other guys.
Tarantino, yeah.
But
Thomas Anderson, of course.
Yes. But you know, I think it's obviously I can see that, and as someone that loves watching movies, I can get like swept up in the romanticism of that. But I think what I've always liked about Soderbergh is that he is prepared to try these things and use it in such a way that it doesn't feel like a gimmick. He's really embracing this technology because he feels like it's the sort of best thing to do from a filmmaking perspective, to try out different things. And that kind of continued right through, as you say, to his use of like an iPhone, which obviously Sean Baker used before him. But it's a cool thing to be that open-minded about it, and to really dispel these sort of myths around the kind of importance of having like big cameras and the best tools, and that's for an aspiring filmmaker, that's quite an inspiring thing.
Oh, totally. Yeah, just the idea that you could basically film, you're not limited by technology that isn't available to you, like it's in your pocket. And I do think he's a huge fan of sort of democratizing filmmaking as much as he can, and that kind of extends to the way he releases some of his films as well. I'm not actually too au fait with the specifics, but I know he like releases them in theatres and on telly in the same day.
Yeah,
he does that kind of thing,
which is kind of like quite commonplace these days.
Yeah, I know, like,
which is strange to think that at one point that would kind of be like an artistic statement, whereas now it's kind of like
Film 4 have it as well.
Yeah,
and you can go and see it at the cinema if you want to, but also it's not it doesn't have to be just there. Like the idea is to spread it as far and wide as possible, and I think he likes experimenting with the different methods to go about doing that. Yeah.
Also, one of the first filmmakers to start using streaming services to distribute his films.
Behind the Candelabra, wasn't it? That 2013?
Yeah.
That was HBO, wasn't it?
Yeah, he did High Flying Bird and The Laundromat, two films of his I'm not sure if I have seen, I can't remember them, but they're both for Netflix.
Yeah, High Flying Bird was another iPhone one as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
The Laundromat, I'm not sure what... That was Meryl Streep, wasn't it? I think that wasn't very good. It's funny, like, some of his films are not good at all, are they? Like, they're really, like, not just... I suppose what I'm trying to say is, if another filmmaker, a filmmaker that wasn't as well known did it, it would be just dismissed immediately and kind of just put to the side. But because it's him, I think the content of some of his films, like, is I remember watching Side Effects, and that was just like really not a good movie. It was just a really, I don't know, you might enjoy it. I don't know if some people do, but sometimes the experimentation
doesn't pay off.
Yeah, like the hypothesis doesn't work. You know?
What was that assassin film with Gina Carano?
Haywire.
Yeah, that's another weird one.
Yeah, there's a bizarre shot in that where like Ewan McGregor's standing out looking at a beach and Gina Carano just sort of runs up behind him, and it's a really funny moment. It's played entirely seriously.
Right, okay.
And just the way it's shot is just baffling and a bit like unexpected. Yeah.
That is again, like, it just speaks to it. But even if there are plenty of misses, you can't help but admire it. I think it's a really interesting way to go about making films, and there are definitely some pretty severe misses and a lot of films. But as I said before, I think the kind of oddest thing about him is sometimes you don't even know he's been involved.
Yeah. Like he was a cinematographer on the second Magic Mike, even though it was directed by someone else.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he went back to do the third one again as a director, I think. But it's just odd to me that sometimes he just serves as cinematographer, or he's quite fond of editing other people's work differently. And I don't know what he does with it, because he must just keep it for himself. But I know he's a big fan of like getting the rushes from other people's films and cutting his own versions and stuff. Yeah,
so. He edits and shoots films under different pseudonyms. Oh,
does he? Oh, okay. Yeah. So he cuts them himself, does he?
So I just got it up here because I thought it was quite interesting. He serves as a cinematographer under the pseudonym Peter Andrews.
Okay.
An editor as Mary-Ann Bernard.
Oh, really?
So if you see those names pop up, maybe it's him, or it's just other people that have that name.
So I did that once. It's pretty stupid. But the last film I made, my name is on it so much because obviously I'm a bit of a. I don't like talking to people about making films, so I end up doing a lot of it myself. But I couldn't bring myself to credit myself as an editor, so I used a variation on what the Coen brothers use.
Oh, really?
So they used Roderick Janes, and I used Jane Roderick.
Ooh,
so yeah,
subtle.
I know, yeah.
I wouldn't have known.
Yeah, I don't think anyone in the film festivals noticed either. But yeah,
that's very humble.
Well, I don't know if it was. I think aping the Coen brothers really isn't.
No, I admire it.
Yeah. Witching hour is that now?
I also quite admire his kind of stance on the industry, particularly in terms of distribution.
Yeah, okay.
And I think it's interesting now, given that you see so many properties being kind of produced and distributed in-house again, like Marvel,
okay, yeah,
for example, which is strange given that the monopolies of classic Hollywood were dispelled, out of concerns for this kind of dominance that was kind of like...
was that 60s, 70s sort of?
Well, yeah, I mean, officially sort of classic Hollywood, like late 50s.
Shit.
I think maybe 60.
Yeah.
But,
okay, yeah.
Obviously, that was broken up because the studios controlled everything from, obviously, they contracted all the actors and the crew, the directors, the writers, but also they controlled the cinemas. They owned the cinemas that they distributed to. So it's obviously very difficult for any sort of outside studio to get a look in when the sort of the most powerful studios had all of the control. And that's why that was broken down. And there were various other reasons for the collapse of classic Hollywood, but that's one of them. And obviously that allowed filmmakers, the new Hollywood era to be born, all this kind of stuff. But the idea of distribution then became this thing of making a film, getting funding for making the film, and taking it to a film festival like Cannes. Yeah. And basically just trying to get people to pick up the film and distribute it. And that's something he's kind of rallied against.
Okay, yeah.
I guess because, once you kind of involve distributors, maybe in certain situations, I'm sure this is probably more often than not, they exert a kind of control on the film, and they might make certain requests. Yeah,
cut down the runtime's a big one.
Yeah,
because of the amount of screenings per day can increase. I definitely think he's eager to take the business side out of Hollywood as much as he can. And if that means the film loses money, then I think his sort of philosophy is, well, so be it. It might make money back from ancillary revenues, but he really isn't. I get the feeling he's not too worried about the return on his films. I might be wrong, because obviously he's directed Ocean's 11 and did 2 sequels. But
Magic Mike.
Yeah, exactly. There's 3 of those as well, isn't there?
All very sort of lucrative franchises, really.
Yeah. So maybe it should be more apt to say that he is open to the idea of a film not really doing that well and would refuse to kind of compromise the vision for the film to make money. But equally, he's probably delighted by genre to the extent where he's happy to follow it and to kind of the budget would probably increase for a project like that. I know he's got another film out this year which looks a lot safer and a lot more likely to make money. I think it's got Cate Blanchett and Michael Fassbender in it. But his presence, the film we'll discuss in a bit, is probably his one for him.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, it definitely has that feeling of it.
Yeah.
Which I loved about it. But yeah, we'll go into that a bit later on. I guess one of the other things as well, on the back of that, things I guess that kind of permeates throughout that kind of argument is again this kind of romanticized idea of money men versus the creative.
Yeah.
And it's often seen, particularly from the eyes of film fans like ourselves, that it's the money men that kind of fuck it up.
Yeah.
And the creatives never do. And obviously we're all aware of the fact that sometimes, not always, but sometimes maybe studio notes aren't always a bad thing.
Totally.
In certain situations.
Yeah.
But I have always admired his sort of steadfast kind of refusal to bend the knee as much as is sort of feasible against these kind of, because I think the reason why it's so easy to be swept up by the romantic idea around this kind of battle is that, fundamentally, as far as I'm concerned, obviously we all know that some films are made for profit and they're going to do that in a way that's, you know, which is the films are going to feel like they're made by committee, you know, and that they exist, and it doesn't always necessarily mean they're going to be shit, but you know, there is kind of like something, I don't know, like the idea, you know, the idea that this is kind of like a singular vision, or indeed a collaborative process from a group of individuals are all passionate about their respective roles and the ultimate objective of making something good, is always going to be, in my mind, preferable to this kind of boardroom going, well, what does our marketing say? What do the test screenings say? You know, because they're not always right either, and you know, it's always with this view to maximise profit, which I think is often, almost always, at odds with what any good kind of artistic or creative practice should be about. And we've spoken about this before in the context of films like Barbie, haven't we? To kind of the battles that these films fight, particularly the ones that are kind of critical of it, and there's always going to be an element of, you know, there's always going to be something contradictory about that. But you know, as long as films are being made in this system, I think, you know, I don't know, like there's always going to be a huge part of me that's going to really admire the people that refuse to bend the knee or stay within a certain area of filmmaking that means they don't get these kinds of people who are more profit driven to make big decisions about the way a film, how long a film is, or key sort of points of the narrative, you know. I kind of admire him for that, you know, as much as I'm aware that can be over romanticised.
I think that's evident in his output, which is mixed. You know? But it's still fascinating. Even the misses are fascinating.
I like a fuck up. We talk about this quite a lot. Like some of the films we like. I mean, we said this before. I think when we had the Film Angle Boys and we talked about films we die in a hill for. A lot of those were like fuck ups.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
And there's something about that. You know, there's something admirable about it, even if it's sometimes it's like, wow, this is really shit. But like, I don't know, like I just feel that's always going to be infinitely more interesting to me than a film that's made to sell lunchboxes, you know.
Do you want to move on to ghost movies?
Yeah.
Okay. I've got a bizarre question to open with this. So there's some films which may or may not be like categorized as a ghost film, or more specifically, the characters in these films, like, are they ghosts or
right?
Not?
Okay, yeah.
Just as a quick sort of like, do they count? So I always thought like Freddy Krueger, because he does die in the and come back, right? And he's able to enter the real world, as we saw in Freddy's Revenge, the second Nightmare on Elm Street film. So is he a ghost? Would you categorise him as a ghost? Cause,
I thought he'd be more like a demon.
Okay, but
like a sleep demon.
But he was at one point living and like a living man.
I know what you mean. It's a grey area. I watched funny enough you say that. I watched a Fulci film, The Beyond.
Oh yeah, okay.
And it's about like a woman that inherits this old hotel in the middle of the sort of bayou outside New Orleans.
Oh, cool.
But it's actually built atop of hell, a gate to hell, classic sort of Fulci style.
Yeah.
And there's lots of ghost moments in that. And I was thinking, do I mention this in the context of the discussion? Because I think, like you say, there's such a, you know, it does cover such a broad scope, not just of horror movies, but like thrillers, romance films.
Yeah, big
you know,
time.
like Ghost. I mean, I guess you know, that is obviously a sort of definitely a sort of paranormal romance. Would you call it? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, because the ghost is able to interact physically with not only the real world but other people at points. Is it a ghost?
I guess the kind of mythology of this kind of supernatural being is dependent on the movie and the intention, isn't it?
It varies. I mean, it varies from culture to culture, like, and you know, with regards to, you know, some kind of people in parts of the world, it's not even remotely kind of a scary notion.
No,
a
lot of cultures. A lot of cultures have quite a sort of kind of like quite a positive relationship with it. Whereas I think on our side of the pond, it's very much, you know, we're almost terrified of it. Yeah,
the idea of a sort of spirit kind of re-entering.
Or just us not existing anymore. I think there's something. I think that's a big part of the reason why ghost films are so scary to us.
Yeah, definitely. Although weirdly, if it turned out that ghosts were real, I'd probably be pretty relieved because I'd be like, oh, well, at least there's something going on afterwards.
Something afterwards, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Wouldn't be quite...
But isn't it usually like you're sort of wandering in eternal pain?
Oh, yeah, that's not so good, is it?
No.
Maybe I should go and get those tyres changed after all.
Oh, don't worry, I'll be a ghost. That sounds all right.
Yeah. You know what? I do need that.
Watch my significant other get married again.
Yeah, I suppose that's the idea is to not linger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Freddy Krueger, demon, but was a bloke at one point, not a good bloke.
No.
What about?
Good God, no.
Yeah, no. What about I don't know, Jesus of Nazareth, Passion of the Christ? There's a bit at the end where he gets up again.
Okay.
Ghost. Is that a ghost, would you say?
Well, isn't it that he can resurrect, though?
Yeah, but does that count as a ghost thing, or would that be more of a zombie?
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that is just being alive.
Star Wars?
Ooh.
When they come back?
Oh, yeah, Force Ghost. I think that's...
Force Ghosts. That's a ghost.
That's a ghost.
Fucking right, yeah.
Even in the visual sense,
yeah,
very much a kind of entity that appears, fades in.
I love the recut when they get all young Anakin, isn't
it? Yeah.
So crudely into...
That's
thrown in.
Who is it? It's Yoda. It's
Obi-Wan,
who is still old, but then Anakin comes back somehow as his sort of 23-year-old self.
Is the idea is before he's Darth Vader, so he's found purity again.
Okay. Yeah, I think
as a Force ghost,
maybe. Yeah. It's impossible to pick holes in Star Wars. There's always
as we well know, it's pretty bulletproof.
Yeah.
I guess maybe to sort of like focus our discussion in, we should maybe focus.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Maybe like. Paranormal like home films.
Yeah, okay, right.
Because obviously Presence is one of those.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I feel like they're the most common.
Yeah.
In terms of like ghost films that are set out to sort of scare you.
Yeah.
They tend to be set in domestic spaces.
I think, just to kind of the reason probably for that is it's very cheap. And also that is where people tend to feel most comfortable. So it's about an invasion of that space, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think any film with ghosts in it that is set in a sort of broader, in a more expansive world wouldn't be as scary. There's something about being invaded and a disruption of your normal routine, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. There's almost like a claustrophobic element to it, isn't there?
Yeah.
I also think there's something in the idea of kind of like the way we treat the home. Like there's almost this kind of feeling that these domestic spaces almost inherit the character of their owner. And I don't just mean that in a literal sense in the kind of way that we decorate the house.
Yeah, okay.
It's kind of like when we were peeling the wallpaper off of dining room, we found like the sort of
the height gauges of people as they get older. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so like that almost feels like they're trying to sort of imprint something deeper into the house than just kind of like superficial. The things that people go, oh, this is nice. You know what I mean? Like,
okay.
In terms of, more decorative.
Okay.
I feel like there's this sense that you're really putting, when you like move away from a house after living or a flat or wherever you've lived for a long period of time, there's a kind of like, I always have that feeling that you're leaving something behind that's quite significant. Something that's held a lot of you and the people you live with for a very long time and the memories that are associated with that. And there's this feeling that the memories are kind of like in the walls. Do you know what I mean? It's like we do put a lot of focus on that. And I think there's something in that, particularly in the context of ghosts that, they are like, they're kind of like just like memories.
Yeah. Quite often
sad ones.
Oh yeah, quite often there's a time element of that where literally the ghost is sort of doomed to replay moments or the last moments of their life, and they're not actually interacting with the current time. It's just like like you say, they're a memory that sort of lives on through. I mean, that might be a reason why there's the ghosts walking through walls trope, because if you think about it logically, if a ghost is interacting with matter in it's able to sort of go through things, then like surely what is the ground to them? Probably just fall through the ground, wouldn't you? I don't know, but yeah, you're right. I think that is why a lot of the films,
or it's an emotion.
Oh, okay, like a feeling,
like anger.
Okay, so we're talking
like Poltergeist, for example, or those
Sixth
kind
Sense
of that there's a tragedy, and the manifestation of that is the manipulation of the environment. But what pushes that manipulation is the kind of dominant emotion that tends to come from these kind of ideas around the afterlife and purgatory and all these kind of things. And but if in a lot of these kind of ghost films I'm thinking about, there tends to be a tragedy at the root of the ghost's sort of existence in this domestic space. Usually they've been murdered or wrong done in some way, and that manifests in this kind of spectral fury that kind of haunts the kind of walls of the house and then trashes it or attacks people, etc., depending on the film or what kind of intentions. Definitely did that. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Poltergeist is. I think. Did I talk about that on?
Oh yeah, Poltergeist has come up.
When did I last talk about it?
About 5 episodes ago, but that's fine because Tobe Hooper comes up a lot in this. It's I think it's definitely it'd be silly not to mention it at least briefly. Yeah.
I think it's more of like an ideological thing,
yeah,
in the sense of Poltergeist, in that you've got obviously the two creative forces. You've got the kind of the dirty kind of like textured horror of Tobe Hooper, sort of like smashing almost incongruently with sort of Spielberg's kind of like family starry-eyed view of the American family unit. And whilst he is not afraid to show the kind of darker elements of that, they're definitely more subdued and in the background, or they kind of like they're a narrative. It's like a point in the narrative, that tends to be resolved by the end of the film. Like a breakdown in father-son relationships is a big theme, right?
Oh yeah.
But I love that combination. I love that so much, and it works really well because Hooper's sort of, I don't know if it's necessarily cynicism, but he's kind of like, feeling that he can take a film to its absolute limits in terms of like huge set pieces. And he's literally like blasting rays of like sort of ghostly light through the kind of American, the American dream. The idea of having like a perfect house.
Yeah.
The sort of American nuclear family, and it's almost like
you've built your house on this, right?
Yeah. And in this case, it's like a sort of burial ground, right? I think.
Yeah. They call it an Indian burial ground. I'm assuming they mean Native American.
Yes, I would have thought so. Yeah.
So it's like. This family has chosen to ignore the
it's a property
heritage.
Development, isn't it?
Yeah, and they've kind of bought into that,
which is a comment in itself about the idea of the kind of the sort of rapacity of the kind of American dream, and that it's sort of so dismissive of history.
Yes,
and which is I think another pretty key theme. I think it's explored pretty overtly in one of the scenes where, because the guy is like one of their top sellers, isn't he? The dad. And he meets the kind of head of this housing development company, and they're talking about this kind of development, and it's all across this kind of like Great Plains. It used to be like this kind of place of real sort of cultural significance for Native Americans, and it's just covered in these kind of very samey looking kind of houses, and there's something very sterile about the way in which people interact with one another.
Oh yeah.
It feels like a sort of Douglas Sirk film in many ways, that these people are kind of like. There's an outward beauty and an outward sort of sense of comfort, but there's like real kind of sadness and struggle and a narrow-mindedness that prevents true expression, which is a kind of classic Douglas Sirk thing. But Hooper takes it to a whole new level, and he just kind of like turns it into this kind of like just so bold and ridiculously striking and quite fun.
Film, at moments,
I honestly love it, and I didn't. I'm always so happy to talk about it because not only because it's well documented my love of Tobe Hooper on this podcast, but I just think it's one of the greatest, certainly like American sort of ghost films.
Oh yeah,
of all time.
I think it does. The fact that it keeps coming up does kind of really makes me want to rewatch it for a start. But yeah, the undercurrent of. The sort of Native American thing. It's kind of what people think. Some people think The Shining's about that as well. About desecration of the sort of Native American ideals in favour of like a sterility.
Yeah,
that is fake, and not. I think the kind of key thing to remember is that it's not sustainable, whereas the old version was, and I think that's the difference.
It's always through the window of the American family unit as well.
Yeah,
They kind of exposing its sort of fragility.
Yeah,
and you take it out of a certain situation, or you stay long enough, and you're going to see imperfections. The white picket fence, the nice car, the sort of like well-paid job, all of that kind of stuff initially obscures on the face of it, and you can almost see why people are swept up by the desire to have it.
Oh yeah.
But then stay long enough and you're going to see something.
Yeah, you're going to have skeletons in your swimming pool.
Exactly. Or a tree that attacks your kids.
Oh, I love that bit.
Yeah.
Very playful.
Well, it speaks to Tobe Hooper's other side as a filmmaker, I think.
What you were saying about memory really made me think of that film A Ghost Story, David Lowery.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that? Casey Affleck, Rooney Mara.
Do you know, I actually haven't.
Oh, okay.
No, I haven't.
I'll briefly touch on it. I wasn't actually a huge fan of it. It's like a 3 out of 5, I think, for me. But what it does really, really well is it kind of dismantles the idea that your house is your own. So it starts out... I'll kind of explain the prop briefly. Spoilers ahead. It starts out and it's very, very normal, kind of young couple move into a new house, the classic thing, right?
Yeah.
He it's not entirely happy. There's sort of fractures in their relationship. He gets killed in a car accident, and the rest of the film he's under like a sheet, like a white sheet.
Oh yeah, I have
holes.
seen the promotional material. Yeah,
and he just follows his wife around as she
does she know he's there?
Not, she kind of senses him a little bit, but not. It wouldn't be out of the ordinary for you to just assume that she's remembering him as opposed to seeing him
as a bedsheet.
Yeah. She doesn't literally see him in that form.
Oh no, but she doesn't. I'm assuming she doesn't remember him as that either.
No,
right? Yeah, because that'd be a bit odd.
No,
probably why he crashed.
Yeah. Widen those eye holes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You think it's going down a direction where it's going to all be very sad because she's going to move on.
Yeah.
And she's going to remarry and she's going to probably move out. Yeah. And it does do that, and it does kind of have that element about it whereby he's watching what happens afterwards.
Right. But
then it carries on and it goes into the house becoming a block of flats and stuff, and it kind of goes really quite far, like hundreds of years into the future, and he's just stuck there, like almost doomed in this sort of cycle, repetitious cycle of, and he cannot leave not only the house but the plot of land that the house will eventually be. And it's like really, really, like, just in terms of the idea of a memory living on, and then when everything goes to shit, it will reset and the memory will kind of carry on.
It takes a whole different meaning. It becomes torture.
Yeah. It is like really... I mean, it's quite abstract and quite sad. And there are bits of the film I thought were really, really took the piss. Like, there's like extended scenes which everyone praised, and I thought it's like long one takes, which I thought were a bit tedious. But the film does play with the idea of a spiritual memory really nicely, and I recommend it if you're into that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like the idea of like taking something that is considered so sacred, particularly in our society, of home ownership. It's almost like the sign that you've made it in life.
It's the last big thing, isn't it? Apart from maybe children.
It's a stepping stone to that, isn't it?
Yeah,
having that kind of nest in which to sort of do those things. But
yeah.
It's interesting, and I remember saying this, remarking this to my partner when we moved into our house. I thought it's funny, like, if we do live here for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like this house is... I can't remember how old it is. I think it must be at least a couple of 100 years old.
Victorian, yeah.
So there's so many people that have already lived and died in this house.
Yeah.
And I just think, God, isn't it funny that we spend so much time sort of thinking about this, obsessing over it, and it won't be long till...
Yeah. Someone else.
She's there, like, putting the key in the door. Just fucking hell, like, quick, just enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know. I'm like, God, I'll be dead soon.
Oh.
Not quite that bad.
No, yeah.
But you know, I think you're right. That there's a kind of almost refusal to accept the transience of it.
Yeah.
I think in society we're told that having the house is the thing.
Is that an
it's a sign of like, you know, you're accepted almost on a sort of, or maybe not accepted, or maybe accepted, but thought of on like a higher plane. You've done more, you've achieved more.
Got a mortgage, it's an adult thing.
Whereas in reality, like, you know, it's brief, it's fleeting, and I think that maybe that might be that might have something to do with the fact that, you know, of why we kind of place such significance on the home, not only as a place of safety and, you know, it's something that's foundational to kind of like any kind of meaningful success in our lives, but also just a way of kind of like staving off the fears of our immortality almost.
Yeah. I think, you know, there's an expression, it's a kind of an American expression, it's called the forever house, which is like what basically a lot of Americans are into building their own homes, I think.
Yeah.
And
so am I.
Yeah. I think it's less popular in England because
you can't fucking build it anywhere.
Yeah, there's no land. Well, the land is all owned by people already. There's no more land left basically in England. But in America, you can build your own house, and it's called
it's part of the mythology of America as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
that kind of like
having your plot.
Expanding into the West and
going at it
finding
alone.
your own fortune.
And I think that expression is tinged with sadness because it's not forever at all. Someone will buy that after you either move out or expire.
Yeah, your sort of conniving shit cake eating kids will be fighting over your candle set.
It might be the big
when you're long gone.
Yeah, beginning of the end of a sibling relationship. I mean, people. You're right. People fight and fall out over property, and
it undermines it, doesn't it? The sacred, it's the kind of you're right. And it's funny. It's one of those films that I keep thinking I must see it.
It is good.
The poster's quite striking, and but it's I remember.
It's pretentious. David Lowery's most pretentious film. But it is very rewarding. Yeah, I know. Yeah,
I do like him.
I really like him. But this was on shaky ground for me, literally haunted shaky ground. But it does just. It's a reminder of a place and a setting, and it not being yours, is it being shared with other memories and other.
I like that.
And those memories are equally as important to. As your own, it plays with that idea a lot, and I love it for that.
I'd like to mention another film that takes another idea around kind of like the paranormal. Firstly, I don't know if I should put you in this position as we're being filmed. Can you take no? Do you believe in ghosts?
I definitely used to.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of like folklore and traditional. I was absolutely terrified of the notion that someone would be I would wake up and there'd be someone standing at the foot of my bed looking at me. I absolutely be out of anything paranormal happening to me, that is the worst one by far. I would rather have books chucked at me any day or crucifixes moving around the room. I don't care, like that's fine. Do I believe in them? As I got older, I don't. So I still find it really, really fascinating. I don't know. I actually don't know. I think the is my answer. Yeah, I'm not sure. No, I'd love for there to be. Like, honestly. Yeah, I really would.
The reason I ask is because I think this film, Personal Shopper, which I think you mentioned in the outro last... I think it really made me recalibrate the way I framed my own suspicions about paranormal activity.
Yeah.
Because... You know, I think there's always a kind of tendency, I certainly from myself, whenever people tell me ghost stories, there's always a part of me that really enjoys hearing them, because there is something just, you know, that kind of campfire storytelling thing is probably one of the best kinds of stories to tell.
Yeah, like, great. But,
you know, there are certain situations where it's just really tempting just to sort of shit on people's stories and poke holes in them. And
I know.
But what I found in Personal Shopper was that this idea of like believing in them as a coping mechanism, as a way of dealing with trauma, of the trauma of loss. And I found that certainly thematically. I mean, I thought Personal Shopper was just an excellent film across the board. But
really good.
It was the first great Kristen Stewart performance for me.
Oh right, okay,
Don't get me wrong. There probably were other ones that I thought were good.
She really fit into that role, didn't she?
But there's something about that role for me that I was like, God, really fucking good.
She was really convincingly like grief stricken.
Yeah.
That.
But there's just something about that idea of like, and you sort of see that in culture, don't you? Those people that go around and obviously profiteer off people's grief by kind of saying they can talk to them and stuff.
Yeah, cold reading.
Yeah, and all that kind of stuff. And that's all, pretty shitty. But then you hear stories about even those that have been debunked and are known to be liars.
Yeah.
And yet they still sell out communal spaces.
David Copperfield, etc.
Yeah, and it's almost this thing that people don't want them to be debunked because it helps them deal with it. And whilst I think there's still something ethically troubling from the perspective of that individual, there is something in that. And I think Personal Shopper, obviously narratively it's not about that, it's just about someone who is like a stylist personal shopper who loses their brother.
Yes, her brother.
And it's about her sort of dealing with what she feels like is her brother's sort of presence.
Yeah. And it's revealed to you.
Her.
It's sort of, you as an audience member, at least initially, you in this world, the paranormal is absolutely real. Like there are occurrences in the film which are quite frightening.
Yeah.
And then there's something that happens at the end which brings it all into question and like changes the way you think about what perspective have I just been watching this film from. Yeah.
I think it's just really special for that. Because it really made me think about, it made me feel like a bit of, and perhaps justifiably so, how much of a twat I've been when people have told ghost stories.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been like, oh, fuck off.
Yeah.
But I mean, whilst I might still treat some stories with skepticism, I'm a lot more, well, I like to think anyway, I don't know if it's necessarily true, but I hope that it has made me someone that's a bit more understanding of why people might believe in them in certain situations.
Yeah. I think completely agree. I do completely agree with you. I think if someone told me a story about like something that happened in their house, even if it isn't linked to a sort of overt trauma, I would listen to them, and I would, because they're good stories. Like they do give you chills, right? And they kind of make you, what would I have done in that situation? Also, as I said, like I kind of like the position I'm in terms of like I don't know, maybe, but at the moment I think it's more of a case of maybe privately I would sort of think there's a way that you probably, it's peripheral vision, or there's like scientific ways of these things happening, but I do love the stories. I really think the stories are something quite special, and they give you a feeling which some people don't like. I quite enjoy being scared.
Yeah, some people are absolutely terrified of them.
No, that's a good question. I actually don't know how to answer the initial question. Really.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought threw you under the bus a bit there. But I thought,
what a
kind of
question.
the context of the film, it makes sense.
I do love that film. Yeah, I think that's really. It's quite a gentle film, isn't it? Like there's a plot, there's sort of something going on with a boss, isn't there, which kind of disrupts that.
Yeah. Can't quite remember that subplot actually.
No, it goes back to her brother and like how she feels about that. That's a good, unexpected, unexpectedly really like emotionally mature movie about a ghost.
Yeah.
About sort of a presence. I can't not mention the others. I think we talked about The Sixth Sense already. Yeah, so we're probably going to leave that one. But the others is very similar in terms of not the plot but the twist.
Nicole Kidman, right?
Yeah, Nicole Kidman living in Jersey in 1945, so at the end of the Second World War. They get 3 new caretakers that come in, and these caretakers are sort of, and their behaviour is slightly odd, and the relationship between them and Nicole Kidman breaks down, and there's like pianos that start playing themselves and things, and the house is basically occupied by what they consider to be a sort of malignant presence or force, and there's a whole new family, and there's like an old woman, and it turns out that it's the Nicole Kidman and her kids are the ghosts, and it's this new family that are the ones that are being subjected to the sort of the paranormal goings on, which is, if I explained it kind of in a sort of very matter of fact way, but it does work. Like I really like that film. I think from like a storytelling point of view, Really, really effective. Some really good scares in it, but the scares are interweaved with the plot quite nicely. It's a very sort of stately movie. It doesn't have a shock value, and I quite admired that about it. The only shock value, and probably one of the best moments in the film, is when they're going through that book of the dead, and like obviously I think in the Victorian era they used to take photographs of the corpses, and you're looking through these photos, and it's just like it's so like the feeling.
How do they die?
You. The kids, Nicole Kidman goes mad and suffocates them, I think, with a pillow.
Herself.
Yeah, and then takes a shotgun to herself. So it's actually like ridiculously tragic film.
Blimey, yeah.
And yeah,
funny, Dale mentioned it to me.
Really?
Yeah, friend and long time listener.
Yeah,
and I was trying to piece the film together because I have seen it, but it's one of those films you watch like a long time ago.
It is good. Yeah, it's like it isn't a novel, I don't think, but it's like watching a very well adapted novel.
Right.
In the way the sort of the plot sort of unfurls and the way it's sort of almost read to you, I suppose. Atmosphere is excellent. Nicole Kidman's very good in it.
Always a safe pair of hands, isn't she?
Yeah, I swear to God,
particularly in this kind of territory.
Yeah. She's been in. I swear she's been in her 40s for about 30 years. Do you know what I mean? She's one of those people that's sort of bizarrely ageless. Anyway, yeah, I love that film. I think it's really good. I think as a ghost story, as a kind of folk tale, it works. As a sort of, you could watch it, you know, if when you're younger and you put on for a sleepover or something, watch that because there's some really good moments in it, like that are just like bone chilling. Yeah, and I think it has something which is difficult to put into words because talking about it. It sounds like a rip-off of The Sixth Sense, which has a very similar twist.
Yeah.
But it does it in a very different way. Director never did anything else of note, I don't think. Spanish guy. He also did the music for it, which is a really good soundtrack. It was one of those one-off filmmakers that never did anything else good again.
Oh, right, okay.
I might be wrong in that, yeah.
Huh.
But I don't think I haven't heard of anything else he's done, so
no.
Yeah. Email in.
Yeah, you've got the email address. Yeah, it's sort of.
I think his name's Alejandro.
I don't know why I'm pointing at the TV.
Yeah.
Somewhere here.
Amenabar, yeah. At gmail.com. Imagine if we got an email now. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, imagine that.
Oh.
Let me just check.
Yeah.
No. Nothing from him yet.
No.
Must be busy.
Yeah. Elder Scrolls. Elder Scrolls Online.
Yeah.
I used the email address to sign up to Elder Scrolls Online.
Yeah, I got excited when it said an email, and I was like, "Oh, an email from Elder Scrolls Online."
Yeah, it's not very good, Elder Scrolls Online.
That's a brief aside.
Yeah, I didn't get on with it. Yeah, you watched a film which I've discussed in the recent past.
Yeah, on this podcast or on
this podcast? Yeah, The Innocents.
Yeah, The Innocents. I'm sorry, man. I remember when I said, I've watched this film called The Innocents, and I have no memory of our discussion about it.
You did explain it as if it was like a revelation.
I
love that film.
Just kind of like a bit embarrassing, really, on my part.
I watched it with my granddad.
Oh, was that in the Oast House?
Yes.
I do remember.
Yeah.
Fucking hell, okay, that's all right. Yeah. Oh, man, I was blown away by it.
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? Really good.
You know, there's so much to love about it. Just reading about the kind of way that they shot it was just fascinating. So for those that haven't seen it, it's a kind of Victorian era ghost film.
Yeah. Turn of the Screw, adaptation of the Turn of the Screw.
Which I thought it wasn't the case until Jan corrected me. He was like, it is, and it says it on the Wikipedia page. For some reason, before watching the film, I decided that it wasn't an adaptation of Turn of the Screw. I don't know why. So for those that haven't seen it, it's a kind of haunted mansion sort of shtick. And
possession as well.
Possession, definitely. One of the creepier elements of the film, I think. On a thematic and sort of subtextual level. And a governess is hired by some kind of like philandering playboy type to go to this house and look after two of his nephews because he doesn't want to.
He's busy in the big city.
Busy in the big smoke.
Yeah.
Drinking sherry and having a ruddy good time. And so he sends this lady over to go and look after these two children. Two of the most terrifying children I've seen in a film.
Oh, yeah. Good performances.
Yeah.
Really, really good.
Joe and kids just look bizarrely English.
Yeah.
It's not so bad coming from English people, I don't think, to say that, but there's just something very oddly English about them that creeps me out.
Their accents.
And their faces. Sorry.
Yeah.
Please email in response. Would they be alive still when the film come out? 61? Probably, yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to think so.
I hope so, yeah. This isn't Victorian England, yeah.
We'll look that up afterwards.
Yeah. Are those children alive?
Yeah.
Well, they'd be adults now. Unless they stay children forever.
Maybe.
Which would be,
I hope so.
not to their benefit, because they're creepy looking kids.
Yeah, and they speak like this.
Yeah.
It's perfectly...
Like prim and properness, isn't it?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so she moved... She comes to this house, look after them. Things start off really well. She bonds with the children really well. And there's a maid who's living there and a couple of other staff members. And the longer she stays there, the more she becomes aware of this kind of like haunting presence. And the haunting presence is of the previous governess, who was a younger woman who died in mysterious but supposedly tragic circumstances. And the film sort of slowly unravels the nature of those circumstances, the reasons behind them, and how a lot of it is at odds with Deborah Kerr, the main character who plays the governess, her sort of morality and belief systems, which are quite rigid and fixed.
Yeah.
As it's Victorian England, she's the kind of representation of those ideas, certainly around things like relationships, sex. I think there's a kind of a weird focus on that, which, given the fact there are children in the film, makes it quite discomforting.
That scene.
There's a subtextual thing. It's not literal. I don't mean it in that sense. I just mean on the subtextual level. There's some really bizarre stuff going on there. And as she unravels more, it becomes this sort of kind of possession film. And these spirits, so one of them being the previous ghost. The previous governess, and then it's the chap that she was obviously having an affair with.
Premarital relations.
Oh, yes. And these spirits basically almost possess the children to act out.
Miles gets possessed by the chap, doesn't he?
And that's just one of the most sort of thematically uncomfortable moments I've had in a film in quite a long time. And it's also just incredibly atmospheric. It's directed by Jack Clayton, who wasn't a hugely prolific filmmaker, was famously known for actually being quite unlucky in terms of his projects and things not coming off the ground. Directed a great film 2 years before called Room at the Top with Lee Harvey, which is like a kind of like searing class drama set in Northern England. It's fantastic.
Nice.
What a great Lee Harvey performance. Someone who was equally unfortunate, died quite young despite a really promising small cluster of performances, was in Manchurian Candidate.
Oh, right, okay.
Was the guy that, gets brainwashed. So, anyway, but there's something about Clayton's ability to kind of like really deeply embed quite discomforting ideas around kind of class and identity and the resulting sort of morals and ideas. And there's a kind of sweaty intensity to his films that is very present in The Innocents. The way it was shot on CinemaScope, which is kind of like anamorphic. Which is, kind of distorts the frame. But they, in this sort of the night stuff, the kind of ghostlier stuff, they kind of lit very centrally. And kept everything dark around it to accentuate the kind of, obviously, the
kind of claustrophobic feeling, but opening up during the day. That's really cool.
It's a really cool idea, and they even painted lenses black either side, just to kind of give this sense of kind of depth.
Nice.
I was really taken by it. I thought it was visually striking and stunning, and a kind of real kind of like critique of those kinds of ideas and values. Like it's English prim and properness. And it kind of opens up the potential for her as a character. Like Kerr plays it really well. There's kind of like a maniacal grace to her. You get this sense that she has lots of her own regrets. I think because her father was a religious figure,
right?
And she was brought up by him, and you get this sense that she's had to kind of hold a lot of herself in. Sorry, I've talked for ages.
No, mate, no, it's good. I love that film. I just atmospherically really, really nailed it. One of the times in my kind of earlier stages of like digesting movies was me thinking, Oh, old films are good.
Yeah.
Because it's funny how difficult that was for me to kind of watch. Even films from like the early 80s I struggled with because of the aesthetic differences. Obviously, I'm fine with them now, but at the time it took a lot for me to watch films like The Godfather. It was a real like... and those kinds of films, but The Innocents was one of those times where and Psycho as well. That was the other one where I was like, no, this is top
good
tier.
stuff.
I should have watched 12 Angry Men because I would have loved that at the time, and that would have cemented that even further. Didn't see it till I was like 26, but there we go. Not a ghost film, sorry. But I agreed with you. I love that film, and I think that story is very. I mean, it's been adapted a few times since, but I think The Innocents is like probably the best one. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, great film.
Oh,
really stuck with me. There's like a possession moment and a kiss.
Oh my god,
which is horrible.
It shouldn't be, but it is. Like the way it's framed is just like,
and it's just a bit too long.
Yeah, and it's the moment where you realise that it's. Because before there's kind of it's sort of up in the air as to whether these children are behaving just a bit oddly
as a result of not having like fixed parents,
exactly,
and being thrown away,
or if there's something else going on, whether they are actually sort of enraptured. And this is the moment you're like, this is okay. He's like an adult man trapped in a child's body. And it's like really like confronting.
There's also an element of the film. We'll get to presence in a minute.
Yeah,
but there's an element in the film that it's all in her mind as well.
Yeah.
Which plays quite interestingly into this idea of kind of like the holding things together. The idea of like all these values. No, this is how life should be. This is how it should all be. And actually just cracking and falling apart, and the resulting sort of insanity kind of like exploding from within, Because the ending's just like, fucking hell, Do you remember? I mean, spoilers, the boy dies. Because she's sort of like almost asking him to confront this ghost within.
Miles is unfortunately sacked off.
Thrown in the celestial bin. Good riddance.
Good riddance to the ghost that's possessing him, of course.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, that leads on to presence then. Sort of said this in the intro, but really had no idea what to no sort of expectation really going into this. Based on the fact it just crept out of nowhere in classic Soderberg style.
He's not a fan of a kind of extended marketing campaign.
No, it was literally just a poster in a train station, and a lot of the time you disregard those because it's just like loads of like posters of books that like all variations on Bravo 20. A heart pumping thrill ride. Death Storm.
They've always got a kind of target is part.
And I like to look at them because it kind of if you enjoy them, fair play. I'm not judging you, but it's quite funny. They all seem very similar to me, but I just never really. And then I just remember seeing this poster and thinking Soderberg, ghosts, and I was like,
coming out of retirement again. Soderberg.
I know. Fucking stop retiring. It's slightly annoying when they do that. Why are you doing that?
I don't know. Part of it.
I mean, fair enough. I mean, But
he wants to express disillusionment with the whole system, but then he clearly can't help himself, can he?
Yeah, obviously he's really passionate about it, stop retiring, man.
I saw the trailer in the front of another film, and it was... So I think the concept was given away, the perspective thing, which is very unique to this film, but I still find it quite surprising. I thought... stylistically really worked. I mean, it's not really as much of a gimmick as it sounds. As the whole film is shot from the perspective of the haunter.
Spectral POV.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, but it doesn't shy away from cutting as well. I quite like that. The kind of the one take thing. I think you sort of said after the film. It's becoming a bit tired now, so this film has the good grace to let the scene play out and then just cut to black for a few seconds. I like that. Really surprising because I had also heard some mixed things about it as well.
I think that the what marketing there was, particularly in terms of the trailer, it did that fucking really annoying thing that horror films do, and Longlegs did this as well. Longlegs was worse. The marketing was worse for it, but scariest film ever. Do you know, like when Longlegs did that thing? It was like obviously the audiences all going, and then like they strapped like a heart rate monitor to Micah Monroe.
Okay, yeah.
And as the first time she sort of did a scene with Nicolas Cage, it's just like, I mean, fine. I guess that's just the nature of the beast these days. But it does create an expectation.
Yeah.
And I think this film suffered from that. The idea of this being the scariest film of the year, scariest ghost film of all time.
It's not that scary.
No, it's not that scary.
Spoilers,
It's more like a sort of dread. It does get into your skin a little bit.
Yeah.
But not, it's not in the way that people, if you're going to make those kind of comments, you're going to attract an audience of people that are going to kind of, scares for them are kind of like, and I'm not saying this with any sense of judgment, but it's kind of like, it's kind of like more visual.
Yeah, it's like The Conjuring 2.
Yeah,
like,
and that's, and there's a kind of association with scares and fun.
Yeah,
and spectacle.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, and that's fine. And we all want, we all need that from time to time. It's quite cathartic and enjoyable to have those kind of experiences. But this kind of film wouldn't work well with those kinds of audiences because
no.
the scares aren't. It's a very subdued and restrained film.
Yeah,
and I think that works to the film's benefit because there are so many haunting movies and possession films and nun films and all these kinds of films that they exist again for the spectacle of the scares. And the jumps and all that kind of stuff, and it's nice to have this kind of this alternative kind of horror experience. But I do think the marketing that existed really let it down on that.
Yeah, agreed.
Created an expectation that was never going to be fulfilled.
It included there's a moment in the film which does get quite intense. It's like the one moment where it does, and it included that in the trailer, and that was a mistake.
Yeah,
the film should have been marketed differently. Because I think the audience that found it would have maybe been a bit smaller, but would have been more welcoming to it.
Yeah.
The bit I found the most out of all of it, the most kind of like heart-stopping, I suppose. Not that's the word. That's the wrong term to use. Dread-inducing, I think, is the right term to use. Is when because there's a sort of at the beginning, it's kind of called into question as to whether it is a ghost that you're following around or whether it's just the cinematography.
Yeah.
And there's a bit where the ghost picks a book up, and I wasn't expecting it, and it really, really like caught me off guard. And I was like, "Oh my Jesus!" Okay, it's quite well done as well. Like the visual effects are quite good. It's pretty seamless. Yeah, and it's revealed like 100% to be this poltergeist that's just sort of observing a family, which is a large portion of the film is actually dedicated to the family and the breakdown of this family basically, and the breakdown of the sort of central relationship holding it together, and what that does to the sort of matriarch, and like she's got some other stuff going on. She's got like some kind of financial difficulties.
Yeah, I think they kind of what I got from it was they kind of stem from this kind of sense of entrepreneurial entitlement.
Yeah. He's more humble, isn't he? And
she sort of feels like, I think she's kind of like bordering on caricature in this way. I think, but it's this kind of idea that is very pervasive in kind of these kind of like business kind of circles, which is very much like you've got to dog eat dog sort of thing, and do anything, and everything is justifiable as long as you're doing it for yourself and your immediate circle. And there's even a line where she says that when she's drunk to her son, isn't there, when she's like, I did it all for you. You might not be proud of me when you find out, but I did do it all for you.
That's right.
It's kind of like one of those weird things, and he kind of just like disregards it as her being drunk, but there's that sort of feeling that because I'm like a shark and I'm out for myself, it's fine, it's justifiable. And almost like the ramifications or any recourse are kind of an inconvenience. Even if you, in this sort of pursuit of, fiscal success, you probably have affected the lives of lots of people along the way. Do you know what I mean? I'm kind of theorising because it's very, and very deliberately and to the film's benefit not included in the film beyond a few kind of like discussions and throwaway things that are nice little tells, I think.
I liked that. I liked how it didn't it didn't kind of lean into any sort of heavy exposition with regards to the family's sort of careers or sort of even like the kind of school dynamic between the two siblings. He doesn't really lean into it that heavily, and it leaves you to basically realise that this whole family has put a front up, and that extends to when they're alone. Like it's Lucy Liu. She's very good in it, incidentally. I heard some mixed reviews of her performance. I thought it was great. But she's sort of, there's moments where she's just sort of not talking to anyone, and she's still guarded about what she does. And they're all kind of wearing a mask, and that doesn't just extend to when they're interacting with each other. It's almost like either they know something's watching them, or they are ashamed of it to the extent where they would just put up this front. That's what I got from it anyway.
There's a sort of cinematography. It's like there's a sense of intimacy, isn't there? Like intimacy in the space. Yeah. So you get really familiar with the layout of the house. Yeah. To the point where you could probably draw it.
Yeah, nice open plan kitchen.
Yes,
very nice,
very much so. Yeah,
really well designed.
I like that the camera would kind of, there was almost like something cyclical. It would kind of repeat the same kind of like routes through the house. Yeah. There's something habitual about that, which I guess falls in line with the kind of more paranormal elements of the film. Did you say paraoral?
Paraoral.
Those elements of the film. And it also kind of like, it gives an intimacy, and I think you're right, a kind of sense of closeness to the family unit, and it's kind of buckling under the weight of kind of like the trauma of loss. Lopsided power dynamics. Like, obviously Lucy Liu's character clearly wears the trousers and has made a lot of decisions. Yep. And that's, obviously has spread into their personal lives, and it's made it very difficult for certain family members to feel that they can really manoeuvre and express themselves. It's almost this idea that kind of like emotion is being too emotional is like a weakness. Which I thought was interesting.
She's more in tune with her son, isn't she?
There's definitely kind of like this sense of maternal favoritism. Her son is kind of this kind of poster boy. Quite handsome,
champion
athletic,
swimmer.
Champion swimmer. Like, he has this kind of something to aim for and to strive for, whereas the daughter seems a bit more listless. I mean, she's been completely sort of like knocked for six by the loss of her best friend, which is, the dad's the only person that seems to be in any way sympathetic towards. By the way, one of the nicest dads on film this year. Well, not on film in terms of actual on film, but in the cinema. Watching experience.
What a nice man.
What a champ.
He's caught in such a bind, isn't he? You feel really sorry for him.
Absolutely. And you just get a real sense of closeness to all of these little details and these little things, but there's almost kind of like it's observing in kind of a dispassionate manner. Which I guess would be kind of, I mean, I don't know. It does suit the kind of like that paranormal element quite nicely.
Definitely. I think one of the sort of main strengths of the film is that it does kind of reasonably realistically portray how a family would react to paranormal activities and situations starting to go on. But then their plight becomes more important again. It's interesting what happens there. Like, they sort of accept that there's something going on in this house that is sort of unfamiliar and frightening. But then they forget about it weirdly. Like, they discuss it at length, and they bring in like a medium and stuff, but then they go away on, like, the parents go away on like a trip, and they're sort of still living there, and they kind of, you can tell that pushing things under the rug is pretty familiar to them at this point.
And to the detriment of the family.
They sort of don't confront this spectre at all head on. They sort of accept that it's there and kind of don't talk about it after about 20 minutes, which I thought was really like interesting and could have failed but didn't. Like, it was good, I thought, in that respect.
Very much so.
I think you sort of mentioned some of the dialogue was a bit...
Yeah, particularly the dialogue between the teenagers. It's David Coet who wrote it. And he's 61. I mean, I think you can sort of forgive anyone for a 61-year-old man trying to write sort of dialogue of teenagers. That's always going to be tricky to pull off convincingly. It was
sort of like, it was almost like he thought they were skateboarders.
There's something quite sort of hokey there's this sort of suggestion that they're quite sort of vapid. And I guess like in the kind of digital age, and because phones play quite a prominent role in the film, not like as a sort of narrative device, but they're kind of always there.
Yeah,
and they're kind of like a way in which you just sort of accentuate the isolated nature of each family member, really.
Yeah.
But it did sort of verge on caricatures.
Yeah.
Like the jock and the kind of nastiness and. Not something that's entirely out of the realms of reality for sure, but I don't know. There's just some. It was quite clunky, and it didn't sort of help everything else, which felt quite naturalistic.
Yeah, agreed.
The performances saved the script in some ways, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it wasn't like a consistent enough of a problem for me to really sort of think of the film like negatively per se. But there were moments I was like, oof.
Yeah.
That's a bit naff.
Yeah,
like the way the teenagers talk to each other, I was like, "Fuck, like."
It's a bit. It isn't
hokey.
Isn't the strength of the film for sure?
No,
and it does bring it back down to a level of sort of almost sort of amateurishness at points. But then it's punctuated by the great moments of like when the ghost starts picking stuff up and the kind of even the moments where the teenagers are going out doing their thing. There's a sort of idea that this kid's is obsessed with drugging people. It's still quite tension. There's a lot of tension in
yeah. I think that's like despite the kind of like imperfections as far as the dialogue goes, I think narratively it's quite interesting. I kind of felt that even if the kind of the dialogue was a bit hokey, the narrative worked quite well. And it obviously you kind of the guy that comes in, the brother's friend, you kind of get a sense pretty quickly that he's the bad egg. He's the one that's been doing it. Yeah.
He's got a kind of school shooter vibe about him.
Yeah.
That's pretty insensitive way of putting it, but like what I mean, the sort of floppy haired Columbine sort of not. He wouldn't look out of place in a trench coat.
No,
sort of thing.
No. But because he's athletic and he obviously rubs shoulders, he's sort of viewed as the kind of one of the kind of the top of the hierarchy in this kind of school.
Yeah, and it's all very surface level, I suppose.
Which I guess the kind of single location can facilitate quite well, and it just puts a bit more pressure on the performers to convey that in a more casual, lived-in manner.
Yeah.
Which I think they mostly do. I think in terms of performance, he might have been one of the weaker elements. That chap.
Yeah. Because he's quite crucial to the plot, and there were moments where I didn't really buy the relationship between her and him either. Like I kind of thought that wouldn't have happened because he was always a bit menacing, and it's a lot to take on.
I guess it's kind of a play on this idea that the many faces of manipulation. Because obviously in those kinds of relationships there are some that would just demand it and expect certain things to be done in a relationship, whereas he kind of like tries to trick her into thinking that she's the one that always has the control.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
which is a kind of quite. That was to me one of the more kind of harrowing moments of the film. Really.
Yeah, he's got an obsession with manipulating her into thinking that she is. And he even uses her dead friend as a kind of a way into that. It's like, don't worry, you're the one that's going to kind of grasp the reins of your life now, and I'm going to help you do that. Whereas, obviously, to us, not only the audience but the ghost, it's very obvious that it's just like, from the outside looking in, it can be quite obvious, but you can kind of also see why she's buying it. So in that sense, I suppose the performance wasn't too bad, but. It's just the floppy head thing, isn't it? The kind of teen floppy head.
Would it work better if it was someone a bit more restrained?
Yeah, or quite nice on the... it would have been more of a twist, I think, to turn out that he was the bad...
Because it was immediately apparent to me that he was just a bit of a bum balloon.
Yeah.
And then he turns out to be a murdering bum balloon. Which is far worse.
Yeah. What do you think of the... Because there's a moment in the film right near the end which concerns... two people crashing through a window, and everything goes very quick. Like it's a very fast moment in the film, and I found that quite difficult to take on, considering the rest of the film was very floaty. And it was a kind of moment of just like, it was really jarring, and then it is just over like that. Like there's no sort of big crescendo. It's just that, and that's over. What did you think about that moment? Because I thought that again, that was one of the weaker bits.
I didn't mind it so much in the sense that it wasn't a particular. What I liked about it, didn't really feel like a set piece moment. It was just something that was happening. It kind of just happened in like very quickly, as you said, and I can see where you're coming from in that sense that there feels like there's a bit more control in the film.
Yeah.
And then to just have that moment, it feels like it's kind of just like, I don't know, kind of like just frittering with its kind of like panicking with it a little bit. But I actually quite liked it. I felt in the context of the film's more restrained nature, I liked that it was sudden and brief, and there wasn't too much of like a stylistic over focus on it because it's a seismic moment in the narrative.
Yeah.
But it kind of, I don't know, it definitely bursts from the otherwise quite restrained nature of the plot, but you know, as a kind of as in a way of handling that moment, I thought it was handled quite well.
Okay,
and I didn't feel like it, you know, because you get in those kinds of moments, there is a tendency to kind of like adopt a kind of style to suit the gravity of what's happening, and
that's true.
And in some cases, yes, I don't feel like Soderberg really does that anyway. I think it's more Soderberg's style to kind of like thread them in, and very much in keeping with the kind of stylistic, thematic elements of the story.
Yeah.
I don't know, it worked for me, but I can totally see it. It was very quick. It was like, oh right,
yeah. Oh,
on then.
All right, and then next night,
if it'd been like a fist fight for a bit, it would have been a bit weird.
Yeah, that's true.
Because like I think it's something that's sort of conditioned by the kind of the watching of movies. The idea of a fight, how it would be in real life.
Yeah,
I think we've spoken about this before, but there's obviously, you know, unless the people are both know what they're doing, and even then, if both people know what they're doing, people often say it can look a bit odd because it's like they're both cancelling each other out.
Yeah.
But you know, you're kind of assuming that these people don't really know what they're doing, so it kind of makes sense that it'd be clumsy and quick.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true. Yeah, I suppose that does speak to the sort of realistic nature of the rest of the film.
Yeah.
I
don't know. Yeah, it's strange. I just think the lead up to that is...
Yeah, it's enough, isn't it, I suppose? Yeah.
But it is quick. It's very quick.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure they like doubled the speed of it.
Right.
From a technical point of view. That might be why I found it odd. Because, again, it just does just take you out of a otherwise sort of very... I wouldn't say serene. It's filled with tension, but it's very... It's playing to Soderbergh's more experimental style. Big time. And you have to really understand that going in, I think, because otherwise, like you said, you're not going to get Conjuring 2. Like, you're not... No,
this isn't in any way...
There's no content, which is really...
It's a very... It's a single location film that's happy to wallow in the subtleties of the family dynamic. You know?
Yeah.
And that's what I quite liked about it. Like, there's not that many explosive arguments. A lot of it's what's not said, what's obscured, what's hidden, which is, I guess, more of a reflection of... I mean, I'm hesitant to say it's completely realistic, in obviously, because it's a ghost movie, and obviously there were mechanics of the plot that have to further it and move things forward.
Yeah.
But I appreciated Soderbergh's, and, you know, to an extent, Coep's willingness to kind of like sit in the scene and drink these kind of quiet moments in, and allow those moments to generate the tension. And it almost feels like the kind of paranormal elements feel secondary.
Yeah.
Or almost kind of like an audience response to those moments in a way.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of want to move away from a scene that's a bit weird or a bit overbearing, or you want to go into the brother's room and rip all his posters off because he's being a bellend. It's almost like an extension of that, the audience's kind of like own emotional response to these moments. And the ultimate luxury that you have as a viewer, I think there's a kind of a comment there, like the idea that, you know, as someone that's observing, you assume a kind of moral high ground that you know, and it allows you to kind of like offer like perhaps an unfair, unbalanced, or entirely fantastical view of how you would approach similar situations.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what Soderbergh is doing really with that. Obviously, it's the spectral POV. It's kind of like it's there to reinforce the kind of themes we've talked about, and obviously the film's kind of ghostly credentials. But I do think there's something to be said about that. The kind of the role of the observer that we are, and particularly when we know we're watching narrative fiction. This is obviously not real. It's all artifice, and that strengthens that kind of relationship, and that with this kind of idea of what you would do that might not necessarily reflect your actual real life relationships with your family or friends. Or the omnipresent kind of camera does give off the impression that you're sort of all powerful as well. Whereas as soon as you leave the cinema, you probably realise you're not. But it does afford you that temporary feeling of superiority, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely easy to judge from a higher ground when you're just observing.
Yeah. Easy to judge American families as well, I think, from the perspective of being a Brit, and quite a lot of their sort of culture is a bit baffling, I think, and it's just another sort of bizarre offhanded comment there from me.
Cutting as always. Yeah. I think you're right in some ways. I do think there is a kind of I think it's like a European snobbery looking across the Atlantic.
Yeah, definitely.
And some of it may be merited depending on experience and your worldview and your ideas of the kind of culture. And I guess it's the kind of dominance that they exude. That's always going to be a sort of symptom of that, I think. But I think it is interesting. I just was really taken by it. I really, really liked it. I was really surprised how much I liked it.
Same, actually. Yeah.
No, like I said, no expectation going in, which kind of helped, I think.
Oh, yeah. I think if I read any more, I probably would have been more disappointed, or at least more sceptical going in. But I liked it a lot as well. I think, I'd recommend this to most people, actually, I'd say. I'd probably warn them that it's not a Conjuring, but I'd be like, if you want a good sort of unusual ghost story, go watch this, and then watch Personal Shopper, and then The Innocents right afterwards.
What a triple bill. You ghosted out.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it is worth recommending. It's stylistically very, very unfamiliar territory for the ghost film.
Yeah,
and it's interesting as well. We talk about the idea of the ghost film being almost kind of like intrinsic to the kind of household, domestic spaces. It's definitely playing with preconceptions that are born from the previous films, from the genre.
Yeah.
And I think there's almost a kind of, it kind of might work for or against it in ways, depending on kind of your relationship with that genre and the expectations that come from that. But I think it's quite clever in the way it handles that. Sometimes like subversion and stuff, it can be a bit of a naff trope in itself. But I like that the film was kind of subtle even with that.
Okay,
and it handled that really well. I really liked it, and credit to Soderberg. I think it's a great return to form for him. And long may he try this kind of innovation with other genres, because like we said, there might be one that comes out where I didn't even know it was him, but if every few films we get a presence, I'm happy with that.
Oh yeah, definitely, me too. Yeah.
Outro.
Questing the cinematic void. There we have it then.
Indeed.
Soderberg. What are we doing next week then?
We are going to be doing Mike Leigh's Hard Truths.
Yes.
We are doing The Brutalist. The film runtime makes it a bit tricky to go and see during the week, so I think we're sort of fairly limited with when we can see that. So we definitely will. I feel like that'll be out for a while. Oscar, buzz. So I think cinemas will be looking to capitalise on that anyway. In the meantime, you're getting us nattering about Mike Leigh's latest offering, which I have already seen.
I will watch it.
So I'm very much looking forward to talking about it. In typically Mike Leigh fashion, it is just rich with so much thematic stuff going on.
Nice.
Under the guise of an initially simple premise.
Which
is very much Mike Leigh in a nutshell.
Right,
but the way he approaches his filmmaking style, the way he directs actors, the way the actors, the sense of ownership they have over their roles, it's a very, very big part of his process as a filmmaker. And yeah, to me, he's one of the greatest English filmmakers, if not the greatest English filmmaker. Certainly alive now, or maybe even ever for me. I don't know.
Up there with Loach, you know.
Yeah, I'd prefer him to Loach. I'd put him over Loach. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'm not actually hugely familiar with his wider body of work, but I am nonetheless looking forward to this, and looking forward to talking about him as well.
Indeed.
Yeah, good stuff.
Nice. Thanks for getting through another episode.
Yeah.
It means a lot. But in the meantime, take it easy, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.